You know, in many faiths, a ritual is so much more than just a series of actions. It's like a bridge connecting our physical world to the divine. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most powerful examples of this, the Christian sacraments. We're going to see how simple things like water, bread, and wine can become signs of something truly profound.
So, here's our roadmap. We'll kick off by defining what a sacrament actually is, then we'll jump into a major point of debate. Are there 2 or are there 7? After that, we'll look at the core rituals themselves, explore why they're seen as a channel for divine grace, and finally, see how they map out a spiritual path for a person's whole life.
All right, let's start with a simple way to think about this. Imagine grace is a spiritual promise from God. I mean, how do you make that promise feel real, tangible? A sacrament is like the physical handshake that seals the deal. It makes the unseen seen.
It seems like a pretty straightforward question, right? But the answer really gets to the heart of how faith shifts from just being an abstract idea in your head to something you actually live and experience. So let's get a really clear definition.
Okay, at its very core, a sacrament is an outward sign of an inward grace. Just think about that for a second. It's something you can see, touch, or even taste, but it represents this deep, invisible spiritual change happening inside. It's where the physical world and the spiritual world shake hands.
And here's something that might surprise you. You won't actually find the word sacrament anywhere in the Bible. But the concept? Oh yeah. That comes directly from the actions and teachings of Jesus. Practices like his baptism or the Last Supper he shared with his disciples, those became the blueprints for these sacred rituals.
And this right here is where we hit one of the biggest dividing lines in Christianity. It all boils down to a simple question of numbers. How many? How many of these secret rituals really count as sacraments?
For most Protestant churches, the answer is 2. And why just 2? Because they believe these are the only 2 rituals that Jesus explicitly commanded his followers to observe in the Scriptures.
And those 2 are baptism and communion, which you'll also hear called the Eucharist or the Lord's Supper. Across the Christian world, these 2 are considered absolutely central to the faith. But for Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches, that number jumps all the way up to 7. They see a wider range of rituals as these incredibly powerful channels for God's grace. You can see the difference pretty clearly here. Everybody agrees on baptism and communion, but the Catholic and Orthodox faiths add 5 more: confirmation, confession, marriage, holy orders, and the anointing of the sick. Each one marks a very specific and unique moment where grace is offered. So let's take a closer look at what these rituals are all about, from the very first moment of initiation all the way through to the final stages of life.
So first up is baptism. You can think of this as the formal entry point, the initiation into the Christian community. The use of water here is deeply symbolic, of course, representing a washing away of sin and the beginning of a totally new spiritual life.
The Apostle Paul put it in a really powerful way. He said baptism isn't just about getting washed, it's about symbolizing dying to your old way of life and being resurrected with Christ into a brand new one. It's a complete spiritual transformation.
Next, we have the Lord's Supper, or communion. This ritual is a direct reenactment of that final meal Jesus had with his disciples. The bread and the wine are absolutely central, serving as these powerful symbols of Christ's sacrifice, his body broken and blood shed.
And those other 5 sacraments? Well, they cover the entire spectrum of life. Confirmation is about strengthening your faith. Confession offers forgiveness. Marriage makes the union between a couple sacred. Holy orders is for ordaining clergy, and the anointing of the sick brings comfort during serious illness.
Okay, so we've covered what they are and how many there are, but let's get to the why. Why do they matter so much? What does it really mean for a ritual to be a channel for grace?
Turns out, they're doing a few things all at once. Yeah, they're visible signs of grace, for sure. But they're also a way to get spiritually renewed, a way to publicly express your Christian identity, and for many, a chance for a really deep personal encounter with the sacred.
And this is where the magic, for lack of a better word, happens. You take these ordinary, everyday things, water, bread, wine, oil, and they're elevated. In the context of the sacrament, they become these vessels that carry a divine meaning that goes way beyond what they physically are.
So, while being a sign of God's grace is a huge piece of the puzzle, you can see how everything else, that personal renewal, identity, and community bonding, is almost just as important. It really drives home that sacraments are both a deeply personal and a deeply shared experience.
And finally, let's zoom all the way out. These rituals aren't just isolated ceremonies. They're meant to be woven into the very fabric of a person's life, creating a sort of spiritual map from birth to death.
You can see the path laid out across a whole lifetime. Baptism marks birth. Confirmation and marriage can signify the commitments of adulthood. Holy orders is about a person's life work or vocation, and the anointing of the sick offers comfort when facing mortality. Put them all together and you have a spiritual roadmap for the entire journey.
And this is just so important to remember. These rituals are almost never done alone. A baptism, a wedding, taking communion, these are powerful community events that strengthen the bonds within the group and unite everyone in a shared faith.
So I guess here's the key takeaway. In a faith that deals with these huge, abstract ideas like grace and salvation, sacraments act as an anchor. They make belief physical. They turn ideas into actual experiences. And that leaves us with a bigger question to think about. In any part of our lives, how do our physical rituals end up shaping our deepest beliefs?